But that's so fascinating, isn't it? This whole concept of risk. And this idea that as a result of COVID, people seem to think that they should be protected from all infections, from all disease, which means life has to stop if that's how we want to live.
Yeah, it's been weird, Dan. I think a lot of stuff has shifted drastically over the past 2 years.
That's for sure.
And I think that one thing that's really gone out of the window as well with a lot of other things is just the concept of risk. Right? Risk is something that exists in absolutely everything we do in life, whether you stay home or you go outside or you get into a car or you board a plane. Whatever you're doing, you're always taking a risk. There's nothing new about pathogens. They're out there. There's nothing new about disease and sickness. This is something that has existed our entire life and for centuries prior to it. It goes beyond the human kingdom across the entire animal and even plant kingdom. And so I think that with all of the measures and restrictions and everything that's been going on, it's been weird how there's now seem to be some people you now hear people saying something like, oh, well, you know, someone doesn't have a right to make me sick, but there's no right not to get sick. That's not even a right that is possible to have. I totally agree, like any sane person, that if someone knows they have an illness or a disease, then you shouldn't go around trying to intentionally transmit something to someone. Of course not. That would be crazy and perhaps even a form of assault, depending on where you are. But life has risk. That's all I'm saying. And I think certainly at this point with this particular disease where we are now almost 2 years into it, everyone who wants to have the vaccine has already had it. Multiple shots in many cases, which is totally fine. Everyone has a different risk analysis and risk tolerance. So people should be totally free to do what they want to do. However, we do have to get on with life. I believe that this virus is simply going to be endemic, just like other coronaviruses, the cold, the flu. It's something that's going to be around. We have to live with it. People have to get on with life. There are other things that matter and things that are very important beyond COVID. And so that's really the point that I was making with
Well, I think you're completely right, but it's very disturbing, isn't it, that risk has almost been politicized now. Because if you say what you've just said, which I think is completely sane and rational, actually there will be a lot of folk, the virtue signalers, the COVID hysterics, who say that it's deeply irresponsible and you're wanting to put other people at risk. That's what they say. I mean, I think that's completely not true, but it's hard to argue with it, isn't it?
Well, people can say it, but it's disingenuous. And it's important to think of how unprecedented that type of thinking is. If someone got a cold or a flu in 2019 or any time prior to that, there would never be this idea that that is because of someone else's reckless behavior or that you should have somehow been protected from that. Literally nobody used to think like that. And so it's a really weird form of thinking, and it's actually very anti-liberty. I'd also say it's certainly antisocial, but it's also a little bit anti-human. I mean, if you want to stay indoors eternally and hide away from everybody and never go anywhere or do anything because you're so afraid of getting ill, then I also support your right to do that. I don't think that's the right way to live, and I don't think you're going to have much fun. And I think you're also taking a huge risk in doing that because you're also not training up your own immune system. But, you know, people should just simply be free to make their own choices. I think if living in a liberal society, as we're supposed to, where people have rights and people have freedoms, then people also need to have the right to be able to assume risk. And there are always going to be people who take on risks that other people don't want to, and that's also their right. And you have, you know, freedom of association. So if you want to stay away from a certain situation, I don't think anyone should be forced into that either.
Zuby, I want to get you to react to the breaking news of the night. So we have video of this footage from the Downing Street spokesperson for Boris Johnson last year. She was doing a mock-up press conference, which she didn't think was being filmed. And she joked about the fact that Number 10 had seemingly had a Christmas party for staff, even though they had cancelled Christmas for the rest of us mere mortals. So have a look at this and I'll get you to react off the bat.
Okay. I've just seen reports on Twitter that there was a Downing Street Christmas party on Friday night. Do you recognise those reports?
I went home. Hold on.
Would the Prime Minister condone having a Christmas?
What's the answer?
I don't know.
It wasn't a party, it was cheese and wine.
Just be clear, it's not.
Is cheese and wine all right?
No.
It was a business meeting.
I'm joking.
This is recorded. This fictional party was a business meeting. And it was not socially distanced. One more, and then ask anybody have any questions today?
So Zuby, there they are, laughing in our faces as they had this potentially illegal, it certainly was a party that went against the spirit of their guidelines, when they were telling everyone else, you're not allowed to see your dying relatives, you're not allowed to hug your mum, you're not allowed to see your newborn niece or nephew. And I'm sorry, today I feel so angry about it. How do you feel?
I think, like a lot of people, the problem is the hypocrisy. That's what it is. Honestly, in my personal position, as someone who doesn't think those restrictions should have ever been made in the first place, I don't have a problem with the fact that I don't know whether or not they actually had this party, but if they did, that in itself, I don't have a problem with. The problem is with the double standard and with the hypocrisy.